The rain drummed against the windows of Murphy's Tavern as Sarah Mitchell sat alone in the corner booth, nursing her third beer of the evening. The dim lighting cast shadows across her weathered face, highlighting the small scar that ran from her left temple to her jawline. At 32, she looked older than her years, with calloused hands and eyes that seemed to hold secrets. The bar was filled with the usual crowd of construction workers and dock hands from the nearby shipyard. Sarah preferred it that way, anonymous faces in a working-class neighborhood where nobody asked too many questions. She had been coming here for 3 months since moving to Norfolk, Virginia, always ordering the same drink, always sitting in the same spot. "Another round?" asked Jake, the bartender, as he wiped down glasses behind the counter. Sarah shook her head and placed a $20 bill on the table. As she stood to leave, her jacket sleeve rode up slightly, revealing the edge of a distinctive tattoo on her forearm, an eagle clutching a trident and anchor with a pistol beneath it. The Navy SEAL trident. 3 men at the next table noticed the ink. They had been drinking heavily all evening, celebrating one of their buddies completing basic training. Tom Bradley, a local loudmouth who had washed out of Navy boot camp years ago, squinted at Sarah's arm. "Hey there, sweetheart," Tom called out, his voice slurred with alcohol. "Nice tattoo. Where'd you get that done?" Sarah pulled her sleeve down and continued toward the door. "None of your business." Tom stood up, swaying slightly. His friends tried to pull him back down, but he shrugged them off. "Hold up there. That's military ink. Real, specific military ink." "Tom, sit down," urged his friend Mike. "Leave her alone." But Tom was already following Sarah toward the exit. "You know what that tattoo means, boys? That's a SEAL trident. And last I checked, women ain't allowed in the SEALs." Sarah stopped at the door, her hand on the handle. The entire bar had gone quiet, all eyes on the confrontation. She turned slowly, her expression calm but dangerous. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said quietly. Tom laughed loudly. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about. My cousin Bobby served with the teams for 6 years. I've seen that ink before, and I know for damn sure no woman ever earned the right to wear it." Sarah's jaw tightened. She could have walked away, should have walked away, but months of staying silent, of keeping her head down and her mouth shut, had taken their toll. "Your cousin tell you about Ramadi?" she asked, stepping closer to Tom. "Tell you about the IED that took out half of Bravo team in '09? Or maybe he mentioned the mission where they had to extract the ambassador's daughter from that compound in Yemen." Tom's face went pale. Those were specific details, the kind that didn't make it into Hollywood movies or bar stories. "How do you know about—" "Because I was there," Sarah said simply. The silence in the bar was deafening. Tom looked around at his friends, then back at Sarah, his alcohol-fueled confidence evaporating. "That's impossible," he stammered. "Women can't—" "Can't what?" Sarah interrupted. "Can't handle a rifle? Can't swim 2 miles underwater? Can't take a bullet and keep fighting?" She pulled up her shirt slightly, revealing a network of scars across her abdomen. "Got these in Afghanistan. Mortar fragments. Kept my team moving for 12 hours with shrapnel in my gut." Tom's face was now completely white. He sat down heavily, suddenly very sober. Sarah was about to leave when the bar door opened and 2 Norfolk police officers walked in. They had been called by a patron at another establishment who had overheard Sarah's conversation with some sailors earlier that evening. Sailors who had become suspicious when she spoke too knowledgeably about classified SEAL operations. "Ma'am, we need to speak with you," said Officer Martinez, the older of the 2 cops. "Are you Sarah Mitchell?" Sarah nodded slowly. "We've received reports that you've been impersonating military personnel, specifically claiming to be a Navy SEAL. That's a federal offense." The bar erupted in murmurs. Tom looked vindicated, his chest puffing out again. "I told you she was fake." Officer Martinez held up his hand for silence. Ma'am, you're under arrest for violation of the Stolen Valor Act. You have the right to remain silent. As the handcuffs clicked around Sarah's wrists, she didn't resist. She had been through worse than a night in jail. What bothered her wasn't the arrest. It was the looks on the faces around her. Disgust, anger, disappointment. These people saw her as a fraud, someone who had stolen honor she had never earned. If only they knew the truth. The ride to the police station was silent except for the radio chatter and the rhythmic thump of windshield wipers. Sarah stared out the rain-streaked window at the passing streetlights, her mind drifting to memories she tried hard to keep buried. Sand and heat, the weight of full combat gear, the sound of helicopters in the distance, the faces of teammates who hadn't made it home. At the station, Sarah was processed like any other suspect. Fingerprints, mugshot, personal effects inventory. The desk sergeant, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, barely looked up as she cataloged Sarah's belongings. One leather wallet, $43 cash, one cell phone, one silver chain with dog tags. The sergeant paused, examining the tags more closely. These look pretty authentic. They should, Sarah replied quietly. They're mine. The sergeant gave her a skeptical look and continued with the inventory. One wristwatch, Casio Digital, appears to be military issue. Sarah was placed in a holding cell to await arraignment. The cell was small and cold, with concrete walls painted institutional green and a narrow bench that served as a bed. A single fluorescent bulb flickered overhead, casting harsh shadows. She wasn't alone. A woman in her 20s, clearly strung out on something, paced back and forth, muttering to herself. An older man sat in the corner, his head in his hands. Sarah took a spot on the bench and leaned back against the wall, closing her eyes. But sleep wouldn't come. Every time she started to drift off, she heard the voices. Tom's drunken accusation, the police officer reading her rights. The whispers from the bar patrons as she was led away, all of them calling her a fake, a fraud, a stolen valor case. The irony was bitter. She had spent 8 years earning the right to wear that trident, 8 years of hell that had cost her everything, her marriage, her relationship with her daughter, her sense of belonging in the civilian world, and now she was being punished for it. Hours passed. The drunk woman was eventually moved to another cell after becoming violent. The old man was released on his own recognizance for public intoxication. Sarah remained, staring at the ceiling and thinking about how her life had led to this moment. She had joined the Navy at 18, straight out of high school in a small Montana town where her options were limited to farming, mining, or leaving. The military had seemed like an adventure, a chance to see the world and make something of herself. She had never imagined she would end up in some of the most dangerous places on Earth, doing things that would haunt her dreams for the rest of her life. The physical training had been brutal but manageable. Sarah had always been athletic, a star on her high school wrestling team. But the mental challenges were something else entirely. Learning to kill efficiently, to work as part of a team where everyone's life depended on split-second decisions, to compartmentalize emotions and function under extreme stress. She had been one of only a handful of women selected for the program during the experimental phase, before the official policy change. Everything about her service had been classified, buried under layers of government secrecy. As far as the official record was concerned, Sarah Mitchell had served 4 years as a Navy logistics specialist and received an honorable discharge. The reality was very different. Dawn was breaking over Norfolk Naval Base when Admiral James Harrison received the call that would change everything. He was in his office early, as usual, reviewing intelligence reports over his first cup of coffee when his aide knocked on the door. "Sir, there's been an incident downtown. Local police have arrested someone claiming to be a SEAL. They're requesting military consultation before federal prosecutors get involved." Admiral Harrison looked up from his reports, frowning. Stolen valor cases had become increasingly common in recent years, with wannabe heroes trying to claim military honors they had never earned. Most were sad cases, men who had never served trying to impress women in bars, or con artists using fake military credentials for financial gain. "What's special about this one, Lieutenant?" Harrison asked. "It's a woman, sir, and according to the initial report, she has some very specific knowledge of SEAL operations, knowledge that shouldn't be public." That got the Admiral's attention. He was a 30-year Navy veteran who had worked his way up from enlisted to flag rank, serving multiple tours with SEAL teams before moving into administrative roles. He had seen real operators and fake ones, and he knew the difference. "I'll handle it personally," he said, reaching for his cover. "Have my driver ready the car." The ride to the Norfolk Police Department took 20 minutes through morning traffic. Admiral Harrison used the time to review what little information was available. Sarah Mitchell, 32 years old, no permanent address, arrested after making claims about serving with SEAL Team 6 in Afghanistan and Iraq. The arresting officers had noted that she possessed detailed knowledge of classified operations and bore what appeared to be authentic military tattoos. The police station was a modest brick building in downtown Norfolk, surrounded by bail bondsman offices and check-cashing stores. Admiral Harrison was escorted directly to Detective Ray Coleman's office, where the case files were spread across a cluttered desk. "Admiral, thank you for coming down," Detective Coleman said, standing to shake hands. "This is definitely outside our usual scope. Most stolen valor cases are pretty straightforward. Guy claims to be a war hero. We check his records. Turns out he was a cook or never served at all. This one's different." "How so?" Coleman opened the file and pulled out several photographs. "She knew things, sir. Specific details about operations in Ramadi, dates and locations that match classified mission reports. When we checked her fingerprints, they came back with a flag from the Department of Defense. Her file is sealed above our clearance level." Admiral Harrison studied the photos. Sarah Mitchell looked tired and defiant in her mugshot, but there was something in her eyes that he recognized, the 1,000-yard stare of someone who had seen combat. Her posture, even in handcuffs, was ramrod straight. Military bearing didn't disappear overnight. "I'd like to speak with her," the Admiral said. Sarah was brought to the interview room in handcuffs, wearing an orange jail jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too large. She sat down across from Admiral Harrison without being told, her back straight, hands folded on the metal table. Her eyes met his directly. No fear, no deference, just quiet assessment. "Ms. Mitchell," the Admiral began, "I'm Admiral Harrison. I understand you're facing some serious charges." "Yes, sir." Her response was automatic, military. Most civilians didn't address officers with that kind of reflexive respect. "The police tell me you've been claiming to be a Navy SEAL. You understand that's a federal crime if it's not true?" Sarah's jaw tightened slightly. "I understand that, sir." "Then perhaps you can explain why you would make such a claim." For the first time, Sarah's composure cracked slightly. She looked down at her hands, then back up at the Admiral. "Because it's true." Admiral Harrison leaned back in his chair. "Ms. Mitchell, I've been with the Navy for 3 decades. I've worked directly with SEAL teams for most of my career. There has never been a woman who completed SEAL training and received the Trident." "Not officially," Sarah said quietly. The Admiral studied her face carefully. There were tells that separated real operators from frauds, subtle things that couldn't be faked, the way she held herself, the scars he could see on her hands and neck, the calm way she spoke about classified operations. But more than that, there was something familiar about her. "Tell me about Ramadi," he said suddenly. Sarah's eyes sharpened. "Which operation?" "There were dozens. The one where Bravo team lost 3 men to an IED in the Market District, September 2009. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. That wasn't an IED. It was a suicide bomber, female, maybe 16 years old. She detonated when she got within 10 feet of the patrol. Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez died instantly. Petty Officer Martinez lasted until we got him to the evac point. Petty Officer Thompson. She paused, swallowing hard. Thompson held on for 3 days at Walter Reed before his injuries took him. Admiral Harrison felt his blood run cold. Those details had never been made public. The official reports had been classified, and even then, the specific circumstances of the deaths had been compartmentalized to protect operational security. "How could you know that?" he asked. Sarah looked directly at him. "Because I was the one who carried Thompson to the helicopter." The room fell silent. Admiral Harrison studied her face, looking for any sign of deception. He found none. "Show me your arms," he said quietly. Sarah hesitated for a moment, then slowly pushed up the sleeves of her jumpsuit. On her right forearm was the sealed trident, rendered in precise detail. But it wasn't just the tattoo that caught the Admiral's attention. It was the small details that only someone who had truly earned it would know. The exact positioning, the subtle shading, the way it integrated with older tattoos from her time in basic training. But it was her left arm that made Admiral Harrison's breath catch. There, partially hidden by the jumpsuit sleeve, was a tattoo that made his heart skip a beat. It was a unit insignia he recognized immediately, one that was supposed to be known only to a handful of people with the highest security clearances. "Dear God," he whispered. The tattoo was of a phoenix rising from flames, with the Latin phrase "De oppresso liber" underneath. It was the symbol of a classified program that had operated for less than 3 years in the mid-2000s. A program so secret that even Admiral Harrison had only learned of its existence years after it was shut down. "Task Force Phoenix," he said, barely audible. Sarah's eyes widened in shock. "You know about Phoenix?" Admiral Harrison sat back in his chair, his mind racing. Task Force Phoenix had been a joint military experiment designed to test the feasibility of female operators in special operations roles. It had been conceived in response to the need for operatives who could blend into civilian populations in Iraq and Afghanistan, particularly in situations where male soldiers would be too conspicuous. The program had recruited from various special operations units, Rangers, Force Recon, Air Force Pararescue, but the most elite candidates had been put through a modified version of SEAL training. The entire operation had been compartmentalized beyond top secret. Even Admiral Harrison had only learned about it through a classified briefing he had received when taking over his current command. "You were Phoenix," he said. It wasn't a question. Sarah nodded slowly. "Phoenix Team Bravo. Call sign, Nightshade. 8 years of active duty, 4 combat deployments. Afghanistan, Iraq, Yemen, and one I can't tell you about even now." Admiral Harrison's hands were trembling slightly as he reached for his cell phone. "Detective Coleman," he called. "I need to speak with you privately. Right now." When the detective entered the room, Admiral Harrison's expression was grave. "Detective, I need you to release Ms. Mitchell immediately. All charges are to be dropped, and this conversation never happened." Coleman looked confused. "Sir, I don't understand. She was caught red-handed making false claims about—" "Detective," the Admiral interrupted, his voice carrying the authority of 30 years of command. "That tattoo is real. She earned it. And if word of this gets out, people will die. Do I make myself clear?" The weight of the Admiral's words settled on the room like a heavy blanket. Coleman looked back and forth between the two military personnel, clearly out of his depth. "Yes, sir," he said finally. "I'll have the paperwork started immediately." As Detective Coleman left to process Sarah's release, Admiral Harrison turned back to her. "Ms. Mitchell, or should I say, Petty Officer First Class Mitchell, we need to talk." There are people who have been looking for you. Sarah's expression hardened. I'm not going back. I did my time. I gave everything I had to give. I understand, the Admiral said gently. But there are things happening that you need to know about. Phoenix may have been officially terminated, but the threats it was designed to combat haven't gone away. If anything, they've gotten worse. He paused, choosing his words carefully. 3 of your former teammates have been killed in the past 6 months, made to look like accidents or suicides, but our intelligence suggests otherwise. Someone is hunting Phoenix operatives. Sarah's face went pale. Who? We don't know yet, but we need your help to find out. You and the other surviving members of your team are the only ones who can identify the threat. Sarah stared at the table for a long moment, her mind processing this new information. She had tried so hard to leave that life behind, to blend into civilian society and find some semblance of normal. But normal had always been an illusion for people like her. What do you need from me? She asked finally. Admiral Harrison smiled for the first time since entering the room. First, we get you out of here and somewhere safe. Then we bring you in from the cold. Officially this time. And then, Petty Officer Mitchell, we find out who's trying to erase the existence of Task Force Phoenix and make sure they don't succeed. 2 hours later, Sarah found herself in the back of an unmarked government sedan, speeding toward Langley Air Force Base. Admiral Harrison sat beside her, speaking quietly into a secure phone, while the driver navigated through Virginia traffic. The orange jumpsuit had been replaced with civilian clothes, jeans, a plain white t-shirt, and a navy sweatshirt that someone had procured from the base exchange. Copy that, the Admiral was saying into his phone. Yes, I'm certain it's her. The Phoenix ink doesn't lie. He glanced at Sarah. ETA 15 minutes. Sarah stared out the window at the passing landscape, her mind still reeling from everything that had happened in the past few hours. This morning she had been a nobody, a drifter facing federal charges for stolen valor. Now she was apparently a target in some kind of conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of military intelligence. Admiral, she said quietly, you mentioned 3 of my teammates are dead. Who? Harrison finished his call and turned to face her fully. Jessica Chen, call sign Phoenix, found dead in her apartment in Seattle 3 months ago. Apparent suicide, but the scene was too clean. Maria Santos, call sign Valkyrie. Car accident in Denver 2 months ago. Brake failure on a mountain road, but the brake lines showed signs of tampering. And Elena Rodriguez, call sign Fury. Died in a house fire in Phoenix last month. Arson investigators found accelerant residue, but the case was closed as electrical malfunction. Each name hit Sarah like a physical blow. These weren't just teammates. They had been sisters in arms, women who had gone through hell together and come out the other side. They had shared secrets, fears, and dreams during the endless hours of waiting between missions. What about the others? She asked. There were 8 of us originally. 2 are confirmed safe in protective custody as of this morning. 1, Rebecca Williams, call sign Storm. We haven't been able to locate. And then there's you. The sedan turned through the gates of Langley Air Force Base, past armed guards who waved them through after checking the Admiral's credentials. They drove directly to a nondescript building in the center of the base, where several black SUVs were already parked. Inside, Sarah was led to a conference room where a small group of military and civilian officials waited. She recognized the type immediately. Intelligence professionals with serious faces and tired eyes. People who dealt in secrets and lived with the weight of classified knowledge. Ladies and gentlemen, Admiral Harrison announced, meet Petty Officer First Class Sarah Mitchell, call sign Nightshade, formerly of Task Force Phoenix. A woman in her 50s with graying hair and sharp eyes stood up. Ms. Mitchell, I'm Director Catherine Walsh, CIA. Thank you for coming in. Sarah remained standing. I didn't have much choice. Director Walsh smiled grimly. Fair enough. Please, sit down. We have a lot to discuss. As Sarah took a seat at the long conference table, Director Walsh opened a thick file folder. What do you remember about the termination of Task Force Phoenix? Official story was budget cuts and strategic realignment, Sarah replied. Unofficially, we knew there had been some kind of political pressure. Congress was asking questions about experimental programs, and Phoenix was drawing too much attention. That's partially correct, said a man in Air Force uniform whom Sarah didn't recognize. But there was more to it. Phoenix was terminated because someone leaked operational details to hostile intelligence services. 3 active missions were compromised, and we lost 2 assets in Syria as a result. Sarah felt her stomach drop. Are you saying someone on my team was a traitor? Not your team, Director Walsh said quickly. The leak came from higher up the chain. Someone with access to Phoenix mission parameters and target lists. We never identified who, but the program was shut down as a security precaution. She pulled out several photographs and spread them on the table. These are the individuals who had full access to Phoenix operational data. All of them held top-secret clearances and above. Sarah studied the photos. Most of the faces were unfamiliar, but one made her pulse quicken. Colonel James Morrison, Phoenix Program Director. She remembered him well, a career intelligence officer who had seemed to take a personal interest in the female operatives under his command. Colonel Morrison, she said, pointing to the photo, he was our handler for most operations. Morrison disappeared 6 months ago, said the Air Force officer, went on vacation to Thailand and never came back. His hotel room was cleaned out, and there was no record of him leaving the country under his own identity. Director Walsh leaned forward. Here's what we think happened. Morrison was selling Phoenix intelligence to foreign contacts, probably for years. When the program was terminated, he thought he was safe. But something changed recently. Maybe his contacts decided he was a liability, or maybe he tried to blackmail the wrong person. So he started eliminating witnesses, Sarah concluded. Exactly. The women of Task Force Phoenix were the only people who could potentially identify his contacts or testify about his activities. He's been systematically hunting them down, making their deaths look like accidents or suicides. Sarah stared at the photos on the table, her anger building. That bastard. He sent us into some of the most dangerous places on Earth, and all the while he was selling us out? We believe so. But we need proof. And more importantly, we need to stop him before he gets to you or the other survivors. Admiral Harrison spoke up. That's why we're bringing you back in, Sarah. We need someone who knows Morrison's methods, someone who can think like he does. You're our best chance of finding him before he finds you. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, processing everything she had learned. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady and determined. What do you need me to do? Over the next several hours, Sarah was briefed on everything the intelligence community knew about Morrison's activities. Financial records showing suspicious overseas transfers. Travel documents placing him in various international locations. Communication intercepts that suggested he was still active and planning something big. We think he's planning one final operation, Director Walsh explained. Something that will eliminate all remaining witnesses and destroy any evidence of his activities. We intercepted fragments of communications suggesting he's arranged a meeting with his primary contact, someone codenamed Chimera. When and where? Sarah asked. Tomorrow night, a shipping warehouse in Baltimore. We don't have the exact location yet, but we're working on it. Sarah studied the maps and intelligence reports spread across the table. Her old training was coming back to her, the ability to process complex information quickly, to identify patterns and potential threats. It felt good to be using those skills again, even under these circumstances. You want me to be bait, she said. It wasn't a question. Only if you're willing, Admiral Harrison replied. We can try to track him down through conventional means, but no, Sarah interrupted. He knows how we were trained, how we think. He'll stay one step ahead of conventional surveillance, but he might get cocky if he thinks he has an easy target. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the airfield beyond. Morrison trained us to be invisible, to blend into any environment. But he also taught us his weaknesses. He's arrogant, and he thinks he's smarter than everyone else. That's how we get him. Director Walsh nodded approvingly. What do you have in mind? Sarah turned back to the group, and for the first time in months, she felt like herself again. Not a drifter hiding in dive bars, but Nightshade, the operative who had survived 8 years in the world's most dangerous places. We make him come to me, she said. Morrison knows I'm the last loose end. If I surface publicly, make myself visible, he'll have to act. But this time, we'll be ready for him. The plan was set in motion that evening. Sarah would return to Norfolk, resume her normal routine, but under constant surveillance. A team of FBI agents would be positioned around her apartment building and the places she frequented. When Morrison made his move, they would be ready. But as Sarah sat in her hotel room that night, cleaning the service pistol that Admiral Harrison had provided, she knew it wouldn't be that simple. Morrison had trained her, and he knew exactly how she thought. This wouldn't be a trap. It would be a chess match between two people who understood each other's capabilities perfectly. She thought about Jessica, Maria, and Elena, her sisters who would never come home again. They deserved justice, and Sarah was going to make sure they got it. As dawn broke over Virginia, Sarah Mitchell, call sign Nightshade, prepared for one final mission. This time, it was personal. 3 days later, the news reported that former Colonel James Morrison had been found dead in a Baltimore warehouse, killed in what police described as a shootout with federal agents. The official story was that he had been selling classified information to foreign governments and was killed while trying to meet with his contacts. Sarah watched the news report from a secure facility outside Washington, her arm in a sling from a bullet wound that would heal in time. Morrison had been good, but not quite good enough. And more importantly, the files recovered from his hiding place had provided enough evidence to roll up his entire network. Admiral Harrison found her in the facility's recreation room, staring out the window at the Virginia countryside. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Like it's finally over," she replied. "What will you do now? The Navy would be honored to have you back, officially this time. Your service record will be declassified. Your medals and commendations formally recognized." Sarah considered this for a moment. For so long, she had lived in the shadows, her sacrifices unrecognized and her service denied. The idea of finally being acknowledged for what she had done was tempting. But she thought about Tom Bradley and the other people in Murphy's Tavern that night, people who had looked at her with such disgust and contempt. They represented something bigger, a society that wasn't quite ready to accept that heroism came in many forms, that some of its greatest defenders might not look like what people expected. "I think I'll stay civilian for now," she said finally. "But maybe it's time to stop hiding who I am. Maybe it's time for people to know the truth." Admiral Harrison nodded understanding. "The truth has a way of coming out eventually. Sometimes it just needs the right person to tell it." As Sarah packed her few belongings later that day, she looked at her reflection in the mirror. The scars were still there, the memories would never fade completely. But for the first time in years, she felt at peace with who she was and what she had done. She was Sarah Mitchell, call sign Nightshade, veteran of Task Force Phoenix. She had served her country with distinction in some of the most dangerous places on Earth. And now, finally, she was ready to come home. That evening, she returned to Murphy's Tavern in Norfolk. The same crowd was there, including Tom Bradley, who looked up nervously when she walked in. But this time, Sarah didn't hide in the corner booth. She walked directly to the bar, ordered a beer, and when Tom inevitably asked about her tattoo, she told him the truth. All of it. The bar fell silent as she spoke, but this time it wasn't with skepticism or anger. It was with respect and something like awe. When she finished her story, Tom was the first to stand up. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology. And more than that, I owe you a debt that I can never repay." Sarah smiled and raised her beer. "No debt, Tom. Just remember that heroism doesn't always look like what you expect. Sometimes it looks like someone trying to drink quietly in the corner, hoping nobody asks too many questions." As the evening wore on, Sarah found herself surrounded by people who wanted to hear her story, to understand what service really meant. And for the first time in years, she didn't mind being visible. She was home,